What's going on, y'all? Yes, it's been a while. I know. I haven't been like feeling the best, and I really was having a hard time just going a certain amount of time without coughing because of this bronchitis, but it's a little better now. Still may cough here and there, so just forgive me, but my goodness, it was so bad. It was like every 2 minutes I was coughing, and it's been over like a month now. But anyway, I'm gonna just try to pardon me, y'all. I'm gonna just try to record this video really quick. And oh man, I didn't bring my phone. Okay, no, I'm not dumb. I know that I'm recording on a phone, but I didn't bring my other phone, which that's okay. And I know the angle's a bit different, so we're gonna try to get it together. Where am I going? Let's just go here. I wanted to just kind of say this. And y'all know that if you watch my videos, obviously I'm giving my thought and my opinion, but I really try to speak from the Holy Spirit, of course. I don't just say stuff just to be saying stuff. Y'all hopefully can tell when I'm joking and when I'm not joking. But I don't know if you've seen the documentary Daughters on Netflix. It was a pretty good documentary. And y'all bear with me because I have the camera on this side now, because when my son gets in the car, he don't want the camera over there because he said he just took it down anyway. But so I have to now be mindful that I'm over here and not over here. But I was if you haven't looked at the documentary, it's called Daughters on Netflix. It's basically about these little girls who grew up without their father because they're in prison. And just a side note, there were so many rules and regulations that I didn't even know has changed in prison, where they're saying now that they have cracked down on no contact visits. I was like, what? My dad was in prison, and I can vividly remember, it may sound like I'm all over the place, but I'm not. So if you knew, hello, God bless you, just follow along. But I remember when my dad was in prison, he went to prison twice, and I vividly remember, I don't remember anything else about me being this young, tender age. But when I was little, I vividly remember my grandparents taking us to visit my father in prison. I remember us getting dressed up. We would sometimes have on dresses. I remember my grandparents, they were pastors. I remember they had their own church. They were very stable. I remember them vividly taking us to go see my dad in prison. I remembered that, and I was young, but I remember that. I don't remember anything else, honestly, but I remember that. I remember there was a time where my dad started off as a Christian, and I vividly remember when he now went over to become, not went over, but when he became a Muslim. I remember that. I remember going into the prison and him having on his, forgive my ignorance, whatever that the little hat is that they be wearing, the little beanie. I remember him wearing that. I remember when we would go, he would pick us up and sit us on his lap really quick. I remember that. I remember those long drives to Green Bay. I don't know why I remember it was in Green Bay, but I 100% know my dad was in prison in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is about a couple of hours from Milwaukee, maybe like 3 hours from Milwaukee. But this was about following these girls who fathers were in prison, and someone started this organization or this little thing to where they would, like, obviously if their dads were in prison for many years, obviously the dads couldn't go to the daddy-daughter dance. So a little girl said to one of her mentors, like, well, why don't we just bring the dance to our fathers? And so that's kind of how that little thing came up. And so this person started this. And so obviously, well, not obviously, well, the guys, they go through they go through like this 10-week course. And from the 10-week course, they then get prepared to go to the dance and what have you. So, but that's not the point about this. So when I was watching it, and again, perception and context is everything, so you have to go see it. But and I'm not judging anybody. I just try to look at things and use it as a learning tool, even for myself. When I was watching the video, the little girl had not seen, she wasn't a little girl. She was probably about 13. She hadn't seen her dad for years. And the mom was, man, I need my other phone. The mom was actually the little girl was about 13 years old, and the mom had not taken the little girl to see the dad in prison because the mom felt as though, well, when you were out in the world, you didn't come see us and you didn't see about her. So therefore, I'm not going to allow my daughter to have a relationship with you. That's it. That's all. And so there was this particular scene in the Netflix series Daughters where the little girl was excited to see her dad. And so the mom makes a comment, and the little girl says, well, the little girl says something to the nature of like, are you not excited? And she was like, trust me. No, I'm sorry. Let me go back. What happens in the Netflix documentary series Daughters, the little girl was saying how she was excited for the limo to come and pick them up so that she can go see her dad. And the mom just makes a comment and was like, to a degree, well, I'm glad the limo coming to pick you up. Trust me, I would not want to be in that limo. And you could see the little girl's face. It was kind of like, and she was like, well, I'm excited to see my dad. And she was like, well, you should be. No, or she said something like, well, I'm glad you are, because I'm not. And when I saw that clip, the first thing, because now, especially because of what I do for a living, I talk to people for a living in the most critical situations. I talk to people for a living in detrimental situations, life or death situations. And when I watched that clip, what all I could see, what was the main thing that jumped out at me, is that the mother was projecting her trauma and her broken relationships with the little girl's father. She was projecting that onto the little girl, almost like stealing the little girl's joy. The little girl was excited to go see her father in prison, but because the mother had unresolved issues, she tried to project that onto the little girl. And the moment I saw that, because I went back and I rewinded it several times, because I looked at the body language of the little girl, her facial expressions, the mother, I watched it multiple times. And here's what I want us to understand. We have to be so careful projecting how we feel onto other people. Just because that was your experience, just because your experience may have been 100% valid, we have to make sure that we're not projecting what we feel, our brokenness, our trauma, our baggage onto our children, onto our family members, onto our friends. Because why am I saying that? We're naturally going to do that anyway, because we're human beings, and I understand that. But we have to be more intentional. Just because your marriage didn't work, don't talk to somebody else and make them think that their marriage is going to be a failure. Just because this particular friend wasn't good to you, don't make somebody else think that they won't have a good friendship. Just because the dating experience for you has had a little bit of pee in it, don't make everybody else think that the dating pool has pee in it. It's a difference between giving somebody advice and being helpful, and then there's a difference between projecting your trauma and your brokenness onto someone else because you have unresolved issues. It's not fair. And so what happens is, if we continue to do that, this is how we get generational issues. And this is how we're not able to resolve generational brokenness and trauma and unforgiveness and bad relationships, even generational poverty. Just because grandmama and them live from paycheck to paycheck, you don't have to take that on and be afraid of saying, well, all I saw was grandmama and them live paycheck to paycheck and rob Peter to pay Paul. You don't have to take that. Put yourself in a position to where you can do better. Put yourself in a position to where you can learn. I don't know why people are afraid to go get therapy or go to some sort of groups or read a book. Books are free at the library. Knowledge. I just posted something on my Facebook and I said, if you don't know who you are and whose you are, meaning you belong to God, the devil will use your lack of knowledge against you. He will use the very thing that you don't know but supposed to know against you. So therefore, you'll keep rehearsing your rejection. You'll keep rehearsing your trauma. You'll keep rehearsing these things. And when I saw that, it crushed me, because the little girl deserved to have that moment. And maybe that mother's father wasn't there for her. Or as she already articulated in the documentary, she didn't care for him. He was too busy in the streets and da-da-da. Okay, fair enough. But why rob the daughter that you birthed from the opportunity of being excited to see her father because of your personal issue? I'm not saying that the mother didn't have a right to be validated in her experience. No, it wasn't fair that the father chose the streets. No, it's not fair to the daughter that the father was in the streets versus seeing about the daughter. No, it's not fair that because of the father's choices, he ended up in prison. So therefore, the daughter really doesn't have her father anyway. We understand that. But what will that profit you by living in that trauma and in that pain? That could have been a moment where the mother could have utilized that to teach her daughter about forgiveness, to teach her daughter about sometimes everybody doesn't make perfect decisions. And sometimes we have to suffer the consequences of that. But here's how you get through. Here's how you move forward. Here's how you learn not to hold a grudge. Because obviously she was holding one. And when I say obvious, of course, I don't know her personally, but I could tell. But because she's broken and nobody is talking to her about her brokenness and her trauma, it was bigger than just the situation with the father. You could tell it was deep rooted. Now what happens is she's going to pass that along to her daughter, and you now have planted a seed. And then we wonder why our children grow up with underlying resentment. We think because we've clothed them and we put a roof over their head that we ain't said and did some stuff that make our children scratch their head like, hold on, mama, I know you was kind of there for me, but you was also bogus in some instances. But see, we don't like that type of accountability. But when you want to be better, you go back to that person, that child, that loved one, and you make it right. You say, I just realized certain things that I said regarding an individual, regarding a situation, or some of my actions, I realized that I was projecting onto you. And that is not fair, because instead of me projecting, I should get some help and support first so that I can teach you to be better than me. I know everybody want to think that they're a dynamic parent. My son was in my car and I was talking to my mom and we were having a little bit of a back and forth. And guess what? After I made it right with my mom, I went to my son and I said, son, you should have never heard that. I apologize. I should never speak to my mother that way. Not only because I don't want him to speak to me that way, because that's selfish. I want him to understand character, forgiveness. When you make a mistake, here's what it looks like to restore and be better and to do better. Not simply because, I don't want him talking to me like that. No, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. I don't want him to sow seeds that he's going to have to reap. And if I'm bold enough to make the mistake in front of him, I need to be just as bold to correct myself to him. Is this making sense? And so this is just a really quick video. What I'm saying is we have to learn to stop projecting our brokenness onto other people. We do it enough. But how about finding a way to be better? Again, get you a book. Listen to an audio if you can't read. I'm not being funny, but if you're not in a position to read something, when you washing dishes, listen to something that is healthy in an area that you struggle in. While you're in the shower or in the tub, put your phone somewhere safe. And instead of scrolling on social media, listen to something that is productive. Gain knowledge so that your woes, your wounds, and your trauma can stop continuing to be open scars. So you can stop continuing to be re-wounded. You don't have to live your life in the battlefield at all times. Trust me, there's a time and place. There's a place where you can be happy. There's a place where the trauma doesn't have to take you out like it used to. There's a place where you can learn to say, I remember when I saw my mom or my dad or this person who raised me or my cousin go through XYZ. I'm going to learn from that. I'm not going to build resentment. And it's not just in relationships. You could have lost a loved one. You could have lost your job. Somebody could have done you wrong on your job. Somebody could have done you wrong just going to the grocery store. It doesn't just have to only be in a personal or intimate relationship. But we have to learn to stop projecting our brokenness and our trauma onto other people. Why are you making people pay for a tab that they didn't run up? But then the person that created the tab, you will show them more grace than the person that shows you, I'm willing to love you unconditionally. You know why? Because it's the trick of the enemy. It's the trick of the enemy to keep you bound, and it's the trick of the enemy to keep you engaged in broken relationships. Every relationship that is broken don't mean it was unhealthy. Maybe you were the problem. Maybe you kept projecting. I know it's hard to acknowledge, but we're here to grow, right? We're here to do better. So when you find yourself projecting, whether you admit it to the person or not, God knows what you're doing. God can see it. And if you have any type of conscious or morals. Somebody shouldn't have to tell you that's what you're doing. You ought to be able to recognize it. And if you can't recognize it, then you really need to get in therapy. If you're one of those people that want to live in a false truth, you really need to get some support. But sometimes we have to take accountability for broken relationships, for some of the characteristics that our children have. Yes, if your children are now adults, they are accountable for their choices, their actions, and their words. But you have to step back and say, what role did I play in the way that they function? And go back and make that right. And here's another thing. I understand that we make mistakes. And yes, you're supposed to constantly ask for forgiveness. That is what the Bible says. But stop doing stuff and making a habit out of saying, oh, forgive me. Just do better. At least create a gap. My goodness. Y'all, we making mistakes, saying sorry, and then an hour later, we wounding the person again. Huh? And I understand we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. But what I am saying is challenge yourself. I'm not telling you to be flawless. But sometimes it's like we wounding the person before they can even get healed. They like, man, I just start seeing the skin grow back. And now you done got me again. Slow down in life. Take a moment. Assess yourself. Have accountability partners. When you saying, I'm asking the Lord to change you, are you? Are you really asking God to show you who you are? Are you really asking God to reveal yourself to you? Are you really asking God to help you? I was listening to something the other day. I was talking to the person and they said, they was talking about God's will. And I said, well, sometimes you have to ask God to reveal his will. And I respected they said, to be honest with you, I really don't want God to reveal his will all the time because I might not accept it. I said, I could respect the honesty because at least if you honest, you know where you at. But some of us just live this facade because we so afraid of accountability. We so afraid to actually live better and do better because the enemy has us so tricked that he wants us to believe that brokenness is just the way of life. There's a difference between something being a part of life and a way of life. Poverty is a way of life for people, not a part of life. When poverty is a part of life, it's like, oh, I remember times where I didn't have no money, but the Lord allowed me to get XYZ amount of funds. Poverty is a way of life for some of y'all. Broken relationships is a way of life for some of y'all. Negativity is a way of life for some of y'all that we don't even know how to function outside of that. You know how I know? Because the minute somebody starts talking to you about the real truth and accountability, you get defensive. You get defensive because you'd rather be broken. Everybody sounds great talking about how they want to be better. Everybody sounds great when you hear, well, I'm finna be a millionaire, but then we've been knowing you for 20 years and you can't even get over 6 figures. Stop letting the enemy trick you and let's be accountable. I love y'all. We'll talk soon.